I'd never done disaster response in the Caribbean. I didn't have any network of UN connections. So, but I was like, hey, I'm right next door. I'm a disaster responder. I can go help. So I jumped in, went online and tried to see what was going on. I reached out to government, and I eventually found this, again, cool group of organic volunteers that got together. There was a bunch of yachties, cruisers, sailboat owners, and we ended up organizing Operations Cruisers Aid, and we got 75 sailboats into the disaster affected area, bringing Starlink, medical supplies, food. In most cases, we were there before government and the UN, and I witnessed probably the most embarrassing disaster response coordination effort I've ever seen. You know, this is a massive disaster for the people affected, but it was just really 6 islands and 40,000 people that were devastated. But over 168 organizations were involved in the response. And still, many people haven't been served. And so, a lot of amazing things happened, and a lot of things didn't happen. But again, I witnessed the amazing nature of the informal response in a disaster, the decentralized response of churches and schools and individuals and business owners all kind of doing these amazing fundraising, you know, raising millions of dollars on Kickstarter and organizing things like Operations Cruisers Aid. And I realized that, hey, you know what? Disaster response is what I'm really, really good at. So I'm going to go all in, but I'm going to figure out how to do this right. So I've been on this 6-month journey of re-exploring the disaster response space after a few years out, figuring out like, hey, how do we do disaster response better? We now have AI, we have drones, and we have Web3, which is how I found network states. And I'm like, oh, network states, brilliant idea. I love this idea of network states. I'm sure I'm going to find a network state that has a whole suite of solutions for its members that make it practically useful to be an incentivized membership into their network state. I didn't quite find that. I found amazing philosophies around network states and coordinations and green pills, and dozens and dozens of different great conversations around governance models and different co-living experiments and DAOs. And I came across this really cool organization, Cabin, and John's here today. He's the founder of Cabin, and they focus on community. And I love that because for me, the biggest thing that's missing in the world is unity and community and coming together. And so I named my project, 6 months ago, Project Union, because Union Island was one of the islands that was devastated. And, nothing in disaster, even though we've got this massive decentralized response that involves government agencies, various different UN groups, Red Cross, international NGOs, development banks and different donors, civil society, private groups of fishermen, all coming together. And I'm like, okay, but going back to network states, I was like, hey, there's got to be a network state out there that's got practical solutions, right? Well, I haven't found it. So we got to build it. But, community is at the center of, so much of our problems in life. We have a loneliness epidemic on our hands. I'm a big fan of one of the TED Talks, Brené Bryce, I think it is, where she says that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection and community. And so, Cabin's vision of community and building neighborhoods really inspired me. And I saw this brilliant idea posted on their forums for a neighborhood OS, a neighborhood operating system, a suite of technology. And then whoa, that's a brilliant idea. The idea of an operating system for a community. That's exactly what we need in the network state movement. That's exactly what we need in disaster response, right? What do we have everywhere on the planet? We've got communities. What do we have everywhere on the planet? We've got governments that run those communities, and we've got municipalities, which are the most effective form of governance. All the network state movement is focused kind of up here on countries and nations. not recognizing that local governments have the most impact on our lives as humans. And my dad, I had this great experience growing up. My dad was a municipal bureaucrat. He ran the Toronto Harbor Commission, which is now the Toronto Port Authority, and then he ran the city of Orillia in Ontario. And so I got to see what it took growing up to run a small city and the politics of mayors and city bureaucracies. And that helped, just inform me. I never knew 20 years ago that would come into life now. I never knew that brainstorming about disaster response would come to where we're at now. But what I would suggest to you is that we've got an opportunity with Cabin and with the different network state movements to come together and build practical tools for real people, which brings us to the topic of the conversation today: network states, coordinations, and green pills for 7 billion people. So if we look at the world as a pyramid, as a socioeconomic pyramid, you got 1 billion people up here, and then you got the global majority down here, right? And the global majority, they're in the US and Canada and Europe too, and the majority, the people up at the top, they're in every country in the world. But most of the network state conversations that I have encountered focus really high up here on sovereignty and individual freedom and economic freedom and freedom of expression. And I love that. And I love all those conversations, but there's a lack of tangibility to it. There's a recognition that eventually they'll have to build physical locations, but only very few of them are actually building. And I'm going to suggest to you that the network that are building and are on their second or third site now, those are the ones to be looking at the next year, the ones that are really actually building and solving real problems. But as network states that are built from the top of the pyramid build, who are going to do the building? Are we just going to have another example of colonialism where rich people with their set of values come into a developing country and use their outside economic influence in order to hire local willed workers to build their idyllic dream and then keep the workers on the outside? I don't think that is the solution. I don't think a two-tiered or multi-tiered solution is. And I think the freedom and all of that, so important. But we have to figure out, how do we serve the 7 billion people at the base of the pyramid, and how do we create opportunities for them? So I'm going to put out a thesis for you that the network state that becomes dominant globally is the one that's going to make sense for the 7 billion the most, not the make sense for the top. And it's going to be the network state that really solves both. It's going to be the network state that combines the wealthy crypto technocrats and elites and digital nomads with the people at the base of the pyramids. And I'm going to put out another thesis for you, that the best countries in the world to experiment with new forms of government are small countries, are micronations. There's something like 75 countries and territories with under a population of 5 million around the world. Just in the Caribbean alone, I think there's 27 states that are under 1 million in population. Each one of those countries is an opportunity to experiment. I'll give you a perfect example of a long-standing example in Grenada. St. George's University is the largest American medical school, I think, in the world, or certainly outside of the USA. But they basically, that one school is about 30% of the GDP for all of Grenada. And so they've got this beneficial relationship where this one institution brings in all this outside money into the community, benefits the whole country. And I think that's beautiful. I think we're going to see future models of that. And I think there's a huge opportunity in disaster response, especially in small islands, for a group of digital nomads and other people with the right values to help out in a response and work together with the local community.